Back in Season 1, League of Legends was still figuring itself out. The meta was loose, the balance was questionable, and the items were absolutely wild. This was the era where an item's description might as well have been, "Makes you stronger. Trust us." Let's start with the most notorious item from this era, Innervating Locket. This bizarre little item cost 2,250 gold and gave you 430 health, 450 mana, and 30 ability haste. But what made it absolutely broken was its unique passive. Whenever you used an ability, you'd restore 50 health and 20 mana. That might not sound game-breaking until you consider champions like Udyr or Sona who could spam abilities on a super low cooldown. The most infamous Locket user was actually a player known as Guardsman Bob, who showcased the item's power on Udyr during the Ionia vs Noxus show match. This single game made the item so popular that it quickly became apparent how broken it was. Imagine an Udyr that could just never die because he kept healing after every ability use. It's like Vladimir on steroids, except you don't even have to build AP. Riot removed Innervating Locket in 2010, but its legend lives on.
Oh no, Vladimir has been taken down from behind by Frost and Eclipse. And now it's just Roku playing Misfortune, trying to hold alive. For the Ionians, this is a 7,000 armor Udyr refusing to take any damage.
Some say that if you listen carefully on Summoner's Rift at 3 AM, you can still hear the sound of Udyr mains crying for its return. Next up is Philosopher's Stone, an item that fundamentally defined support gameplay for years. This modest item cost just 800 gold and provided health regeneration, mana regeneration, and 5 gold every 10 seconds. The stats might seem underwhelming by today's standards, but in early League, when support players had virtually no income, Philosopher's Stone represented economic survival. What many newer players don't realize is how drastically different support economics were in early League. Support players would often finish 40-minute games with only boots and perhaps one completed item. There were no support quests, no Spell Thief's Edge, no Relic Shield. In this harsh economic environment, Philosopher's Stone was revolutionary. What made this item particularly important in League's history was how it created an entire meta around gold per 10 items. Players discovered that these gold generation passives actually stacked, leading to what became known as the Philly Cheese build, 2 Philosopher's Stones and 1 Heart of Gold, which generated 15 gold every 10 seconds passively. The item was so central to the support experience that even 2 weeks after its removal in the Season 3 preseason, it still appeared as one of the most popular items on stat tracking websites. This wasn't due to a data error. It showed just how ubiquitous the item had been in League's ecosystem. Riot eventually removed Philosopher's Stone because they wanted to move away from passive gold generation and toward more interactive support gameplay. According to Riot's own reasoning, the health component of Heart of Gold was too powerful as an early game stat. Finally, let's talk about Leviathan, the forgotten sibling of Magi's Soul Stealer and Sword of the Occult. This stackable tank item gave you 180 health baseline, but its unique feature was that it gained stacks whenever you got a kill or assist. Each stack gave you 32 health, up to a maximum of 20 stacks, and if you managed to get those 20 stacks, you'd get a 15% damage reduction bonus. Imagine a Cho'Gath with Leviathan running at you with 9,000 health and damage reduction. It was terrifying. But the beauty of Leviathan was in its risk-reward nature. Like other stacking items, you'd lose a third of your stacks when you died, so it rewarded tanks who played well and punished those who didn't. Riot eventually removed Leviathan because they didn't like the snowball-heavy gameplay it promoted. Season 2 saw a significant shift in League's meta, especially for the support role. This was the era of gold generation items, when supports finally had a way to feel like they weren't just ward bots. Heart of Gold was the beloved support item that gave 200 health and generated 5 gold every 10 seconds for the bargain price of 825 gold. What made it special? It built into Randuin's Omen, making it a perfect starter item for tanks and supports alike. But the real magic of Heart of Gold was in the item stacking meta it created. In Season 2, it wasn't uncommon for supports, and even some junglers, to stack multiple gold per 10 items, usually a Philosopher's Stone and a Heart of Gold. This combination was so popular that players jokingly called it the bank build. The item was removed in pre-Season 3, and when it disappeared, it took a piece of support players' hearts with it. Another key piece of the gold per 10 meta was Cage's Lucky Pick, which cost 765 gold, gave 25 ability power, and generated 4 gold every 10 seconds. What made Cages unique was its build paths. It evolved into items like Morellonomicon, Twin Shadows, and even Shard of True Ice. Support mages like Zira and Annie loved this item because it let them generate gold while still building toward damage. And in an era where supports were expected to be ward dispensers with no farm, every bit of gold generation mattered. This created an entire meta around optimal gold generation builds. The most common combination for supports was what players jokingly called the Philly cheese build. 2 Philosopher's Stones and 1 Heart of Gold. This setup would generate 15 gold every 10 seconds or 90 gold per minute. In a 30-minute game, that would amount to an additional 2,700 gold, roughly equivalent to a major completed item at the time. The theoretical maximum gold generation possible was 17 gold per 10 seconds, 102 gold per minute, by purchasing all 4 items. However, this was rarely done in practice. Supports typically stopped at 2 or 3 gold-generating items to leave inventory space for wards and other utility items. The removal of these items in Season 3 preseason marked a major shift in support gameplay. Riot replaced this passive gold generation with more interactive gold generation mechanics that rewarded supports for engaging with lane opponents or helping their carries farm rather than simply existing on the map. This philosophy change reflected Riot's broader goal of making support gameplay more dynamic and less focused on being ward-placing gold generators. While supports were playing the banking game, junglers had their own broken toy. Madred's Blood Razor. This 3,500 gold item gave you 40 attack damage, 40% attack speed, and 25 armor. But its real power was in its passive, dealing 4% of the target's maximum health as bonus magic damage on hit. Tank-shredding marksmen like Kog'Maw and Vayne absolutely loved this item. What made it particularly hilarious was that it wasn't even good in most situations. The math just didn't work out compared to standard AD builds. But that didn't stop every silver elo jungler from rushing it on Master Yi and believing they'd discovered some game-breaking strategy. Riot eventually replaced it with Blade of the Ruined King, which achieved similar goals but with better design. Still, for those of us who enjoyed melting Baron in 10 seconds flat, Madred's Blood Razor holds a special place in our hearts. Season 3 marked a significant shift in itemization with the removal of several iconic items, including Ionic Spark. This unique item provided 50% attack speed and 250 health for 2,100 gold, with a distinctive passive. Every 4th basic attack would discharge Chain Lightning, dealing 125 magic damage to the target and up to 3 nearby enemies. Ionic Spark was particularly effective on champions who benefited from both attack speed and health, while also wanting to enhance their wave clear capabilities. According to Riot designer Zyphorus, only a handful of champions could use Ionic Spark effectively, which ultimately contributed to its removal. Volibear was perhaps the champion most closely associated with Ionic Spark. The synergy between the item's Chain Lightning and Volibear's ultimate ability, which also applied Chain Lightning, created a potent wave clearing and dueling combination. As noted in community discussions from that era, some players would build double Lightning Volibear, stacking Ionic Spark with his ultimate for dramatic lightning effects. However, the item's niche application ultimately led to its removal in the Season 3 preseason patch. Interestingly, the Chain Lightning concept wasn't abandoned entirely. It was later refined and incorporated into Static Shiv, which became a core item for many marksmen. Another casualty of the Season 3 item overhaul was Malady, a hybrid item that provided 25 ability power and 40% attack speed for 1,825 gold. What made it unique was its passive effect. Basic attacks dealt 10 bonus magic damage and reduced the target's magic resistance by 4, stacking up to 7 times for a potential 28 magic resistance reduction. Malady found its home primarily on champions, who could utilize both the attack speed and ability power while benefiting from the magic resistance reduction. Teemo was another champion frequently built with Malady. His Toxic Shot passive already applied poison damage on hit, making the additional on-hit magic damage from Malady particularly effective. The magic resistance reduction also enhanced the damage from both his poison and his mushrooms. After its removal in the same patch, aspects of Malady's identity were distributed to other items. Its magic resistance reduction was incorporated into Wit's End, while its on-hit magic damage was moved to Nashor's Tooth. which became the core item for champions like Kayle, who previously relied on Malady. Season 4 marked a major shift in how vision worked in League, and with it came several items focused on controlling the map. This was also the era where some of the most unique active items existed. One of the most beloved utility items from this era was Twin Shadows. This 1900 gold item gave you 30 ability power, 10% cooldown reduction, and 6% movement speed. But its active was what made it special. It would send out 2 ghosts that would seek out the 2 nearest enemy champions, revealing and slowing them when they made contact. This item was a godsend for immobile mages who were vulnerable to ganks or assassins lurking in Fog of War. It was also surprisingly useful for catching out enemies or checking objectives safely. The satisfaction of seeing those ghosts fly out and reveal a lurking Rengar was unmatched. Twin Shadows has actually been removed and re-added to the game several times under different names, like Frost Queen's Claim, and later Twin Shadows again. But its original Season 4 iteration holds a special place in many players' hearts for how it combined useful stats with a unique active that genuinely changed how you could approach the game. While AP Assassins had DFG, AD Assassins and Marksmen had their own delete button. Sword of the Divine. This 2,150 gold item gave you 45% attack speed passively, but its active was the real star. When activated, it would give you 100% attack speed and 100% critical strike chance for 3 seconds. Imagine a fed Twitch coming out of stealth with Sword of the Divine active. 3 guaranteed crits plus his ultimate letting those crits hit multiple targets. Entire teams would vanish before they knew what hit them. The item was particularly disgusting on champions with attack resets like Draven or Rengar. A Rengar could leap from stealth, activate Sword of the Divine, and guarantee that his next few attacks would be critical strikes. It wasn't just a deletion, it was an execution. Sword of the Divine was removed because it created unhealthy gameplay patterns. When an item's primary purpose is to remove the reaction time from a fight, it's probably not great for the game's health. Season 4's jungle meta was defined by a single item evolution: Wriggle's Lantern into Feral Flare. Wriggle's Lantern provided 12 attack damage, 30 armor, and 10% lifesteal for 1,775 gold, with a passive that granted a 25% chance to deal 425 bonus magic damage to minions and monsters. On its own, it was a solid jungle item. However, patch 4.5 transformed this item's impact on League completely. After killing 30 large monsters, Wriggles would evolve into Feral Flare, which maintained the base stats but added a scaling damage component, 25 magic damage on hit to champions, plus 1 additional damage for each large monster killed after transformation. What made Feral Flare historically significant was how it completely inverted jungle priorities. Before this item, the jungle role had been gradually shifting toward a more gank-heavy, lane-supporting position. Feral Flare created an alternative playstyle where power farming the jungle became not only viable but potentially game-dominating. According to discussions on Reddit and the official forums from that period, the item transformation created a dramatic philosophical divide in the player base. Some players appreciated how it gave scaling power to champions like Master Yi, Udyr, and Warwick, who had fallen out of the professional meta. Others criticized how it promoted a non-interactive AFK farm playstyle that could lead to a jungler emerging at 20 minutes as an unstoppable force if not countered early. The design was so controversial that Riot implemented multiple nerfs in rapid succession. First, they increased the stack requirement from 25 to 30 monsters. Then they reduced the healing component. Finally, they adjusted the stacking mechanism to require champion interactions through kills or assists to maximize the item's scaling potential. Ultimately, Feral Flare represented an important experiment in jungle itemization that demonstrated the thin line between creating alternative playstyles and warping the game's fundamental interactions. The item was removed after only existing for about 7 months, but its impact on jungle design philosophy has influenced jungle items and experience systems ever since. For tank players, Atma's Impaler represented the perfect balance of offense and defense. This 2,300 gold item gave you 45 armor and 15% critical strike chance, plus a unique passive that gave you attack damage equal to 1.5% of your maximum health. This made it the perfect 6th item for health stacking tanks like Dr. Mundo or Sion. Imagine a Mundo with 5,000 health suddenly getting 75 bonus AD from a single item, on top of the armor and crit chance. It wasn't just good, it felt like cheating. The beauty of Atma's Impaler was that it solved the eternal dilemma of tank players. How do I remain tanky while still dealing damage? With this item, you could build full tank and still hit surprisingly hard in the late game. Riot removed Atma's Impaler in the 2015 preseason, citing that it was either too niche or too mandatory depending on the meta. But for those of us who enjoyed being unkillable while still chunking enemies, Atma's Impaler represented the perfect balance. We can't discuss removed items without examining Deathfire Grasp, perhaps the most notorious item in League's history. This 3,100 gold item provided 120 ability power and 10% cooldown reduction. But its active ability was what made it legendary. It dealt 15% of the target's maximum health as magic damage and amplified all of your magic damage against them by 20% for 4 seconds. The LeBlanc plus DFG combination exemplified the item's power. A standard LeBlanc combo with DFG followed this sequence. DFG active, Q, R, mimicked Q, W. The initial burst from DFG would be followed by abilities that dealt 20% increased damage, often resulting in opponents being eliminated before they could react. This instantaneous deletion potential fundamentally warped the mid-lane meta. What's particularly interesting about DFG's removal is Riot's reasoning. When they announced its removal in patch 5.2, they explicitly stated that only about 1% of players were effectively using the item's active ability, but those players were single-handedly defining the mid-lane meta. According to Riot's own discussion in the patch notes, the item created a problematic cycle. Champions would get balanced around having DFG, making them even more reliant on it, which in turn limited design space for both the champions and future items. The impact of DFG's removal was so significant that Riot had to implement specific balance changes for champions who had come to rely on it. Ahri received a major kit update that added movement speed to her Q and increased her charm's damage amplification. Veigar got adjustments to his AP scaling. Annie, Katarina, Syndra, and others all received compensation buffs. This demonstrates how a single item had become integral to the identity and viability of numerous champions. The removal of DFG represents one of the most consequential item decisions in League's history, fundamentally shifting the game away from 100 to 0 burst patterns toward more extended engagements with greater counterplay potential. Before it became the support item we know today, Zeke's Herald was very different. The original version cost 2,450 gold and gave you 250 health, 20% cooldown reduction, and an aura that granted nearby allies 20 attack damage and 10% lifesteal. This made it an excellent item for support tanks who wanted to boost their AD carry's damage output. In a time before most support items had useful actives, Zeke's Herald provided consistent value just by standing near your carry. What made Zeke's Herald particularly special was that it was one of the few sources of aura-based lifesteal in the game. In extended teamfights, this sustain could make the difference between victory and defeat. Riot eventually reworked Zeke's Herald into Zeke's Convergence, which has a completely different effect focused on empowering your carry after you use your ultimate. But for support players who enjoyed the simpler days of aura items, the original Zeke's Herald is still missed. These deleted items tell an important story about League of Legends' evolution as a game. Many of these items were removed because they created binary gameplay patterns. They were either mandatory on certain champions or completely irrelevant. Others were removed because they limited design space, constraining Riot's ability to introduce new champions or mechanics without breaking game balance. The early seasons of League had an experimental quality that's less present in today's more balanced game. Items like Deathfire Grasp, Feral Flare, and Innervating Locket represented design philosophies that prioritized memorable player experiences, even if those experiences sometimes came at the cost of competitive balance. While we're unlikely to see these items return in their original form, their legacy continues through League's history. Several of these items have been referenced or reimagined in special game modes, and their design lessons have informed the development of modern items.